I mean, when I saw that yesterday, when I heard that yesterday, I was like, it makes sense.
It does.
So, yeah, because, I mean, for people to say, listen, even though we don't like the conditions that we are working in, yes, we want better conditions, we want improved working conditions, working environment, and takeaway package, yes, but we also want more time to serve. Who does that?
Nigerian workers.
Fantastic workers, you might say. Really fantastic.
Nigerian workers.
Yes, indeed.
You know, when I heard that yesterday, I didn't know, I was like, this is a little odd. I've never seen people, you know, clamoring to work longer. People oftentimes look forward to their retirement, you know. So for there to be a clamor, we need to find out what's the background story. Is it that Nigerian workers are so afraid of the plight of pensioners, which is something that, you know, not enough attention is given to? The fact that oftentimes when people retire, they retire into penury. Is that why they're asking to serve longer? Because ideally, people ought to look forward to their retirement, to that time when you can spend time with your family and perhaps pursue the passions that you've always, you know, had. I think the only people who've had that exception are those in the academia and those in the judiciary. Judicial workers are allowed to work till they're 70, and there's a reason for that. It's because they believe that with the academia and with the judiciary, the experience that you garner over the years makes you even more valuable to the bench, especially for judges, and also in academia. That's why you have a professor emeritus, especially for those who have contributed so immensely to their field of study.
But wouldn't that also be applicable to the civil servant, to the public servant?
So yes, some people will say, so why not the public servant and why not the civil servant? Well, to be honest, I think that there needs to be a thorough understanding of this. But you know, if it will help, I find it a little queer because I grew up in a household where my father looked forward to his retirement. I mean, in the company where he worked, he had the option to stay till 60. He left at 55 because it was also an option. If he had served up to 35 years, you could leave at 55. And according to him, it was one of the best decisions he ever made because he wanted to be able to spend time with his family and also pursue other interests while he still had the strength in his body. So I don't know. I think that, you know, while work is a safe space, we should also look forward to, you know, we should ask critical questions of what we're doing while we're at work. I know that, you know, the Covenant Christian Center held something I was really interested in yesterday, talking about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. You know, who are entrepreneurs? Are those who help the dream of an entrepreneur come alive. You and I are entrepreneurs. So what are we doing while we're there? What are we learning? What knowledge are we passing on? What are we gathering? What passions are we firing? These are questions that we should ask. And if indeed we are firing something, then we should look forward to a time when we're able to get up early to be able to pursue those passions. I don't know. I could be wrong, but, you know, and I know that the conversation will go on and on because this is a request that Nigerian workers have made, and I imagine that they're speaking on behalf of the generality of workers. Perhaps there's been a conversation all around that let me speak for myself, I'm here to understand. So we look forward to the NLC and perhaps the TUC shedding a little more light on why they've made this request, but it'll be interesting to see because other countries, especially France, only recently, when their working age or retirement age was increased, I mean, they had to retire much later. That's what the government was proposing. The workers were wild out on the streets. So let us see, you know, just what the reason. Don't forget that we also have a high unemployment rate. And they're looking, those who are looking to come into the workforce will be looking for the older ones to retire. If they don't retire, how are they going to get in? But hey, Buki, maybe you have some insight that I'm not privy to.
No, Mark, I really am on all fours with you on that retirement age request by Nigerian workers of extending it to 65 years and 40 years of service. And I had to check what the retirement age of the United States of America is, since that's a democracy, you know, that Nigeria always aspires to. That's the yardstick for comparison. And it's interesting, you know, for those born in 1960 in the United States, their retirement age is 67. But any age after that, for instance, for 1995, those born in 1995, the retirement age is 60 years and 30 working years minimum. So there's something happening, you know, amid the Nigerian workforce, and that's a very vivid fear of what life is after retirement, because we tie a lot of our sense of purpose, sense of value to the work that we do. So what happens after retirement? There really is no sense of purpose, there's no sense of value for us anymore. And there's a very vivid fear, as you said, you know, about what pension is like after retirement, what's the means of earning after retirement. The realities affecting purchasing power right now when we're of active working age are not going to be any different. Well, that's, you know, being pessimistic now. Let's hope that it will be any different after retirement. And those are the issues of high cost of living, minimum wage. And then the lifespan of the Nigerian worker after retirement is another issue. We find that many workers, you know, they die when they have nothing to go to, you know, to return to every day after retirement anymore. So those are the issues, you know, that perhaps may have informed that key request of extending the retirement age. Also, another key demand of, you know, the workers, the Nigerian workers on this year's minimum wage is worth looking into, Ayo, and that is the 40% increase for federal civil servant service, which is raising not a little dust amongst, you know, other categories of Nigerian workers. The nurses and midwives, the doctors are requesting that it goes round as well. So state governments have to look into it, and they have to be more creative about their internally generated revenue. And that's not even beginning to look at 15 states that have not implemented the 30,000 naira minimum wage, which has very little value right now. I
think you and Malcolm should compose a symposium for the Nigerian workers so they have an understanding of the issues we are really dealing with. But really, you know, I look at it differently, guys. There is a very important element of the worker's life that we are not looking at all, and that is the rest element. I was in the civil service, and I have this understanding that sometimes when people are told to go on leave, they sell their leaves for one reason. What are they going to be doing on leave? So they just sell it, make some money, extra money, as it were. So that is an issue that I think is also of significance that many of us should consider. People need to rest to be productive. There is a difference between working and serving. And I think that understanding also needs to be communicated. Why do you go to work? Why do you do what you do? I saw Sheo on Twitter recently posting something up when some people were commending him for something. He said, look, the reason he is on air is Section 22 of the Nigerian Constitution. So, and that is to hold government accountable. That's why he does what he does. My personal objectives are clear. Why do you go to work? Is it just to earn a day's living, or to actually make a contribution, as Marquez said, to be an intrapreneur? An intrapreneur is not just a worker. It's someone who understands the vision of an organization and is following that vision as well as following his own vision and making a living as a result of that. It's all about service. And I'm hoping that if we all can get that understanding, we're doing it not just for ourselves, not just for that company. We're doing it for the global interest of Nigeria, because at the end of the day, we have to have a nation before we can have anything else, unless you have options, of course. That's not to say that those other very important issues are not there. They are very, very critical. Bukola raised the issue yesterday of casual workers who are not given their dues, so to speak. And that's not remonstrating anything. The concerns are there, the economic challenges of employers are there, and it's not going to go away unless we deal with them. It's a global issue. We can't look at one without considering the others. Name the sector and tell me which one of them is really satisfied. I don't know, but I guess time will tell. Nota.
Indeed, time will tell. But while we're looking at, waiting for time to tell what it is, that word, I guess it's more or less like a new word that's coming into our I mean, grammar, daily, entrepreneurship. But one of the things I said that struck me, it's the difference between work and service, working and service. Understanding that will make a great difference wherever you are, whether you are an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur. You need to understand there's a difference between working and service. And working, you're just going in there to get a salary. And service is you're there, you're learning, you're growing, you're contributing. Because the truth is that everybody can't be an entrepreneur.
And it's interesting that we call our public space, I mean, we'll talk about public servants, civil servants, you know, civil service.
It should be civil workers because we just go there to get a salary. But you're understanding that it's a service. So you're learning, you're growing, you're contributing, and at the end of the day, you're leaving with a gratuity, with a pension.
Isn't it in the private sector we don't talk about? We don't talk about service. We talk about private servants.
No, we don't talk about But be that as it may, we need to understand that for the workers in Nigeria to be asking for more time to work, as Markwe said, we need to go back and check what is the background to that demand. Is it the fear of the unknown after you leave work, or is it the fact that they want to add to what they are giving to the country? Society. You need to check this, whether private or whether in the private sector or in the public sector. Why would the workers in Nigeria be asking for more time to serve? We'll look at all of that as we go along. But at the moment, we'll take a break and come back to look at what the papers are saying. Go away. And we're starting out with the Vanguard newspaper. Mayday, halt last-minute looting, Labour tasks Buhari. That story continues on page 5, but let's look at what the writers are saying. Indict outgoing governors, ministers, others. Insists on resisting further fuel price hike via subsidy removal. Tinubu promises salary increase. Says, I'll give you a living wage. NBA asks Tinubu, others to protect entrepreneurs, grow middle class. Nigerian workers deserve better treatment, can president. Resist anti-democratic forces, PDP tells workers. Will continue struggle to reclaim stolen mandate, LP assures workers. That one you'll find on page 3. A whole lot of stories in that one headline. Mayday, halt last-minute looting, Labour task Buhari. And you see the picture there at Mayday rally. But below that, oil market, Nigeria's average output drops by 7.6% to 1.3 million barrels per day. That's not very good news. I mean, talking about the fact that what's the reason behind this? I mean, we're talking about Nigeria's crude being stolen, illicit sales of the crude, that conversation about missing barrels of oil. Get to page 20 and find out exactly what this is about. But Nigeria's average output drops by 7.6% to 1.3 million barrels per day.
So we certainly should know what is causing that, because, I mean, there was that contract that was awarded, which they said had done something about crude oil theft. But is it that, you know, are they dropping the ball somewhere? Are people resting on their oars? Let us know what is going on. So you might want to read. What page did you say it is?
Page 20 of the Vanguard newspaper.
Interesting.
Oh, beside that picture, we'll find UTME jam fixes Saturday for candidates who missed exams on page 9. Cancer scare. Why we banned importation of Indomie noodles. NAFDAC providing clarification. You know, that story was out there right yesterday in the midst of the May Day celebrations. NAFDAC has banned Indomie noodles, and NAFDAC says it's importation of Indomie noodles.
That's the imported Indomie noodles. I mean, that's becoming a staple in many homes, especially for children's food.
My children will tell you, Daddy, they would rather have Indomie noodles day in, day out. What's going on here? There are other meals. I mean, growing up, we had Eba. But they rather go for Indomie noodles. I'm sure you will have something to say about that. And police panel invites suspended Adama Arek over Guba Pole Road. That's on page 3. And there was that story about the INEC, the suspended Adama Arek writing to the police, writing to INEC to say he did nothing wrong. But the police is inviting here. Check page 3 for details of that story. Has he appeared? Has he been found?
Did nothing wrong. Go to the police. Oh, why does he have to go? Isn't he supposed to be arrested?
Well, he has written to the police to say he did nothing wrong. He only did what the Constitution conferred on him as powers of the wreck. So go to page 3 and find out what he's saying. And Golden Eaglets battle Morocco for Group B leadership. That's a bit of sport on page 30. And that's it from the Vanguard newspaper.
Well, I sincerely hope that people are not playing games with us, in terms of, what we're hearing in terms of the Adama Arek. We hope that that's just not a game going on somewhere. This exchange of letters. But let's take a look at leadership and what they have on the front page for you this morning. Amid dwindling revenues, Tinubu raises workers' hope for living wage, says your fight will be my fight. We don't want broken promises. Federal government, states may not pay salaries from June, Obaseki warns. And he said it very clearly, someone who is very certain of what it is that he's talking about, that if the federal government and states are able to pay salaries beyond June, well, you might want to listen to that particular tape yourself. You can't speak for government, Labour tells Edo governor. Page 4 is where you'll find details. There are a number of other stories there. At Oshibajo's book launch, you can go on Lord's federal government. That's also there. Manufacturers spend 76.7 billion naira on alternative power in 6 months. These are the issues. 76.7 billion naira on alternative power. So what if that had gone to the power companies in 6 months? Well, page 7 is where you would read the details. God won't allow anybody to tamper with Kano Emirates. That's according to Ganduje. Well, it's a game of wait and see. Let's leave it there for leadership news.
Oh, boy.
Well, Workers' Day is still the big talking point on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning, with a lot of promises being made. Take a look at the headline. Workers' Day, elected officials make promises. Workers' unions kick in lamentations. That's the story of the 2023 May Day celebration. So many lamentations, putting in place the necessary infrastructure before the removal of fuel subsidy. That's the song of the Nigerian worker, especially because of the very real reality of the impact of the price of petrol on the purchasing power of the Nigerian worker. Let's take a look at the riders. Your fight will be my fight. I'll always fight for you. That's ascribed to the President-elect Tinubu. Promises living wage. The question is, what's a living wage?
Well, you see it's in parentheses. Maybe the details are on page 3.
Maybe we should start by qualifying what a living wage would be. We don't know what Labour will be proposing.
So the story, maybe he has more explanation on page 3.
Page 3. Okay. We'll check page 3 just in case you're interested in what that living wage is. Says workers will have more than minimum wage for decent life. Provide for families.
Well, that's a little
University
bit of an
workers. I just believe that it's vague. We must qualify within the context of our realities. And you can't start here. I wish you were on the same page with me, Ayo, on this one. But that's the last of the riders says university workers, doctors threaten industrial action. So that's one reality. Let's go above the nameplates to look at this one. Is also about Workers' Day. Workers' Day, we've paid 13 billion naira out of 19 billion naira global deductions that's ascribed to the Ogun State Governor, Dapo Abiodun. That's another story of the Nigerian worker across board in many states of the federations. So many deductions being made that are not being paid over time. There's also the news about leave allowances not being paid over time. So that's the story of the Nigerian worker. We hope that elected officials making promises will make good their promises in the course of time. And the last of the stories from the front page of News Direct, above the nameplate as well. Credits to private sector increased to 43.07 trillion naira in Q1 2023. That's ascribed to the CBN. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian News Direct.
Question you want to ask then is how much of that has impacted the businesses, the small businesses that took those loans and impacted employment and the whole 9 yards. This Nigerian newspaper has the story on May Day as well, but the lead story is a little different. Quick one about May Day to follow continuity. May Day, respect workers' rights. Buhari charges incoming administration. Stories on page 5. NLC cautions next government against increase in pump price of petrol. Interesting. So on the one hand, there's the plan to remove subsidy, which ordinarily should invoke an increase in the price of petrol, but here is the NLC already putting word out. I guess we'll see how it goes. Right there on the front page of the paper, the details are on the inside pages. Lead story has National Assembly leadership. Northern senators plot against Akpabio, Kalu. Find that story on page 5. Ask Tinubu to resolve same-faith ticket balancing with appointments. That story is on page 5 of the paper this morning. Well, that issue about Nigerians in Sudan, it is of interest. Look at it right there under the major headline beside the picture on the front page. Sudan. Egypt opens border to Nigerians, gives stringent conditions. A bit of a relief,
well,
but at the same time, a bit of a concern.
Yeah.
What the stringent conditions would be and all of that.
Well, the story is to the effect that the Egyptian government needed to profile the Nigerian students that will be crossing the border. But then again, this is a humanitarian situation. Students, mothers, children, have to be comfortable because they're going to be staying there over time. They were there for about 3 days. So our concern was how did they manage? How did they refresh? Did they have food to eat? Some of the students had spent all of their money according to the reports that we had. So it was a humanitarian situation. And I believe that, at that critical time, the Egyptian government needed to deploy officials to, as a matter of urgency, facilitate the profiling process, make it speedy such that the people could cross, as fast as possible, and then they'll be airlifted back home.
Well, that much as that is a great concern, and I believe that the authorities know what to do about that. I want to believe that is a learning curve for everyone that is involved in this matter. And I'm also hoping that this is an eye-opener of sorts for the African Union, because it most certainly isn't something that, 3 days delay. That really is something, but hey,
yeah, peace is very costly.
Yeah, and the concern by Egypt is most certainly valid. That's the newspaper, This Nigeria Today.
And we go on to Daily Trusts, and they lead with that story. I'll give you living wage. Tinubu promises workers. Bukola mentioned that we need to define what living wage is. What is exactly a living wage? But you go to page 4 and page 14. See what the writers are. Respect their rights, Buhari tells president-elect. Labor demands better deals. Can haps on recent working conditions. Resist anti-democratic forces, PDP tells workers. Page 4 and 14. The pictures there are quite interesting. So you see the Nigerian Union of Agriculture and Allied Employees, and with their banner there. But you see the man in front of that banner holding, is that a stockfish or dried fish? But the fish is quite large. Tells me that there's still hope for this country, even though there's been that conversation about not enough fish to meet the demands of Nigerians. So we'll get to a point where we're even having to import fish into the country, and that doesn't speak well of our waters. So you find a lot of people going to fish farming, and in the bid to meet with the demand across the country.
And then you also have people who say, oh no, I don't like the fish that is farmed.
I want the one from the water. But the waters themselves are somewhat polluted. I mean, all manner of things in the water. Plastic, chemicals, waste chemicals and all of that. We need to do something indeed about our waters. But you see the other workers there in the wheelchairs. Interesting sight. Everybody just has to show up there.
Indeed, because even those with disability contribute their quota and they need to be recognized.
Exactly. And then the other story, just below the nameplate, Egypt opens borders for Nigerians fleeing Sudan. Check page 7. But above that, yes, this thing still in captivity. And I think it's good to keep account of this. 7 schoolgirls of FGC burning Yauri, 686 days. And 1 student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 662 days. It's good that we're keeping tabs on this. A bit of sports. Nantes sacks Algerian star Ali for going to under-17 AFCON. But that's it from Daily Trust. And indeed, a look at what the papers are saying, some of the dailies. Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment to look at our conversations. It's still about the workers. Don't go away. Welcome back, and we're still talking about workers, this time in the health sector. They've given the government a 2-week ultimatum, the federal government, over pending agreements. So it's one thing to sit at a negotiation table and say, okay, we're going to do this. It's another thing to see that this is done. So let's look at some of the things that they're concerned about. A review of their consolidated medical salary scheme. That's the resident doctors, the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. They say their economist review hasn't happened in 10 years. There are other conditions that they have also said have not been met, agreements that they've had with the federal government, including also decay in medical facilities across the country. That is a concern to them as well, and they're asking the government to do something. They are demanding an immediate increment in economic structure, amongst other issues. Well, to speak on the doctors' demands, especially in the light of the May Day celebration, we have in the studio National President, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors, who's also a Senior Registrar, Orthopedic and Trauma Surgery, Dr. Emeka Oji. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So how did you celebrate May Day yesterday?
Well, I was mostly up and about from one studio to the other, trying to explain our stand on all the issues that you just read out, and use the medium to appeal to the government and the Nigerian people to understand what we are doing and seek for their help. And
it's that understanding that some will say it's not there, because a lot of people will say the doctors, I mean, the medical doctors are always asking. They are always demanding this or demanding that, and then threatening one strike or the other. Are they even concerned about providing the services that they took the oath to provide?
Incidentally, the current issue we are talking about is actually for the Nigerian people, because I'm sure they have been visiting our public hospitals. They have been seeing the increasing waiting time to see the doctors, cancellation of surgeries. In fact, some people come there and spend a day or two, they won't see that because the numbers are not there anymore. People are living in their numbers. And we have identified the major cause of this to be the terribly poor remuneration that we are getting in the health sector. You may have to know that the consolidated medical salary structure that you just talked about was approved in 2009. And part of the collective bargaining agreement we had with government then was that it to be reviewed every 5 years, and that has not been done up till now. So yes, it's not really about only about payment, but the fact is that this thing is leading to brain drain, and people are leaving. So what do you do to address it? You try to review the salary structure upwards. There is also this issue of dilapidation in infrastructure, and the lack of personnel. So generally, there is this call from our members for government to pay more attention to health by also improving the budgetary allocation to health, because it's only when they do this that they are going to have enough funds to take care of the manpower challenges, the infrastructural need, and of course the remuneration.
It's interesting you talk about remuneration, that the CONMES structure, yes, was reviewed 10 years ago, and that since that time there's been no review. So usually the general increment, which happened sometime in 2019, didn't affect health workers?
Oh, that one is consequential adjustment of minimum wage. It didn't add much to it. And if we are talking about 2019, that is if we are to go by that collective bargaining agreement, that review should have happened in 2014. And we are already in 2023. So ever since then, you've been having rising inflation rate. You've been having an increase in exchange rate and general cost of living. So things are getting worse, but there's no increment in your take-home pay. So, and of course, there is nobody that will see that is no longer meeting up with the needs, and he has a better opportunity outside it's a natural instinct. The person will just decide to go outside there and take care of himself. It's a natural instinct.
I wanted our viewers to, be help to understand it, because I know that usually when there is an increase in minimum wage, it's supposed to affect all workers. There will be a consequential adjustment across board. I know that the consequential adjustment as a result of the minimum wage was a very big issue, because people were saying, oh, if you're going to be increasing from 18,000 naira minimum wage to 30,000 naira, can you also do same for all the other salaries affected along that line? So I think it was a deal reached around, how I think percentages were applied of the minimum wage that was actually increased across board. So I was wondering if that also affected medical workers, or medical workers were exempt, because in recent times we've been hearing something around an increment in salaries, 40% increment, we understand, that should happen, or perhaps has happened, but that, is not affecting ASU workers, and as a result of that, we could be seeing some complaints from there sometime soon. What is that conversation currently happening? I mean, around a 40% increment. Is it something that you think, if it happens, if it hasn't already happened, will it affect doctors?
It has actually happened, and the government has made it clear that doctors and health workers are not part of it. And even the consequential adjustment of minimum wage that you talked about affected us just slightly, and we still have a large number of our people who are still being owed the arrears, which is also part of the demands that our members are making in that communique that we released. So, you see, the fact is that we don't just want government to increase the remuneration without taking into account the figures we talked about. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to address the problem. When people heard that we are demanding for 200% upward review, if you look at it literally, it may sound outrageous.
200%, that's what you're asking for.
Yes, if you look at it, it may sound outrageous, but we didn't just come up with that figure. We believe that any increment should be based on the inflation from 2009 till now. Okay, I'll give you an instance. The exchange rate then was 152 naira to $1. We know what it is today, up to 800. The fuel price then was 65 naira per liter. We know the amount today, and there is even an imminent increment that is coming on board. So if, just like yesterday, we even got to know that the minimum wage you talked about, when it was 18,000 naira, the equivalent in dollar was 91. But now that it is 30,000, the equivalent is for something. So this thing is not just about increment, but can you increase this in a way that the take-home pay of Nigerian doctors and indeed other health professionals will be good enough to make them stay in their country? And we are not just saying this because we know the country can afford it. All they need to do is to increase budgetary allocation. The percentage of our budget allocated to health for this year is 5.7. You cannot be able to meet up with that kind of allocation. They have not started obeying the Abuja Declaration, which we have been talking about since 2001, and because I'm almost sounding like a broken record, because anytime I appear on television, I say this because it's important. In 2001, Nigeria entered into an agreement that it will be allocating minimum of 15% to health.
Indeed. So
can we ask them, have they ever met up with that? The answer is no.
If we're looking at, because yes, some people say your demands are spot on, I mean, in terms of what you're asking for, and you have also tried to justify the reason you're making the demands in terms of looking at the inflation and its consequences. But some people will also say that what about the revenue of the country? Has it really gone in that trajectory? We've seen how we've struggled in recent times and how even the federal government has been borrowing, from what we understand in some instances, to pay salaries. Is it possible for us to now start saying, if indeed the federal government starts to allocate 15% to the healthcare sector, would it be only to pay salaries? Shouldn't it be to invest in that sector to ensure that healthcare is made available to all Nigerians?
Okay, to start with, the revenue that the Nigerian government is getting now. What we are saying is that with this revenue, can you allocate 15%? We believe it will be enough. Secondly, I thought about infrastructural development. In fact, that will even take a large chunk of the allocation, because we need to. There's no reason why Nigeria should be having just one tertiary health institution in every state. It is simply not enough. I've also argued that even if we are too bothered about this brain drain, why not increase the capacity to produce more? Because ultimately, when people go out there, it will still benefit the country. You know that diasporan remittances is one of the main sources of forex to this country. And many people that go out, they will still come back to serve their people with acquired skills and even equipment. So it will benefit everybody. Remuneration is important. Personnel, we don't even have enough personnel in the hospitals. Even though we don't have enough general, we still have doctors who are outside the system clamoring to be absorbed. That has not happened because of the bureaucracy in employment. It takes about 6 to 8 months for you to employ anybody in our hospitals.
The amount, the demand and the circumstances around this demand, they kind of like outweigh each other, so to speak. You talk about 80,000 medical doctors are registered with the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, right? And NMA says just about 40,000 of them are working in country as we speak. So where are the others? Between 3,000 and 3,500 we graduate every year from our universities. You talked about the fact that, okay, why should we have only one tertiary institution in each state? The question will be, as Maupe asked earlier, the revenues for government are appearing to be dwindling every year continuously. But what you're demanding 200% increase. If every other part of the country demands for that kind of increase or increase as well, how would the country stand? Is NAD also thinking about other solutions that can help government also boost this funding for the for the health sector?
Well, the truth is that we are talking about health sector, and I should think that health sector is a very important sector. And of course, which other profession are they trying to bring up a bill to forcefully restrain them from leaving their country? That should tell you something. We are not saying that we are too important or maybe we are more important than others, but I've not seen any country that wants to make progress that will not pay adequate attention to their health sector and their education sector. So, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Let government invest in health. Let them encourage even private sector investment. It is within it, that is what they are supposed to do, and that's what we are advocating. And the truth is that we have placed our demands on the table. We have worked it out. The point, the government has not come for negotiation. They have not called NAD. We wrote a letter to the Honorable Minister of Health as far back as July last year.
Sorry, you said you have worked it out, as in you worked it out with possible solutions to recommend to government as well?
Of course. We have done all that. We have submitted to them severally. So all we are asking for is that let them go, because we have made an offer. What we know that if you do, this is going to help to curtail this issue we are talking about. So let them make a counter offer. Let them call for negotiation. Like I was trying to say, the letter we wrote in July last year has not been responded to. We are aware, though, that they are negotiating with ANMA, but we also heard that what government is offering is 25%. So our members are simply asking, how did you arrive at that 25%? And that was how I started off. It shouldn't just be at your, it shouldn't just be discretionary. Did they take into account the inflation rate, the fuel price increment, the exchange rate from 2009 compared to 2023? Because they are trying to address brain drain. I can tell you that if you leave it at that 25%, you've not achieved anything, because people will continue to live.
Let's bring in our colleagues from Lagos. Ayo.
Let's begin, Doctor, by With your response to this comment from the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment when he responded to that message that you put out.
Resident doctors are part of NMA.
All right.
They are young doctors in training. So if NMA is negotiating on their behalf as the parent body, because they have about 4 affiliates into the NMA. We have them, NARD, you have Consultant Medical Practitioners Association, M.A.N. You have also the General Medical Practitioners. You have another group. So there are about 4 affiliate bodies into the NMA. So what the young men are doing is in bad taste. And I've told their president, you are disrespecting the NMA. The NMA is our parent body. The president of NMA is #1 doctor in Nigeria. So what they are doing is that they're crying wolf when there's none. The bill in question, I don't support it. But you will not deny that legislator is right to put a private member's bill. It's not an executive bill. Even the speaker cannot stop that bill because the man is coming from a constituency. What happens in a private member's bill in National Assembly is either from your constituents that give it to you, or it's you that authored it after having a discussion with people in your constituency, and they say, this is what we think will cure this problem. But for me, that's trying to kill an ant or a fly with a sledgehammer.
2 issues raised, Doctor. One is that your association with this move is disrespecting the NMA. We'll come to the second one later. How do you respond?
Now, this is the largest medical workforce in Nigeria, and we are the largest affiliate of NMA. Secondly, we had a meeting with the Honorable Minister of Health in January this year, where we requested that any negotiation for upward review of commerce, that they should officially invite NAD. We are not disrespecting NMA or anybody in this. All we are asking for is to be part of that negotiation. There is nothing wrong in that. It has happened severally in the past, because that is when we will be allowed to make our input. At least, even if the input we are making is not taken, we'll have something. They will give us a reason that will at least explain to our members. Now, secondly, on the bill, at least you can see that our elder, the Honorable
you go to that
Minister of Labour,
second case, Dr. Oji, just one second. Before you go to that other case, have you had this conversation with the president of the NMA as to being a part of that conversation? As you said, that negotiation consideration, is it a conversation that has happened between your association and the NMA, or are there plans for the NARD to extricate itself from the NMA?
No, that conversation has happened, but the truth is that the government, what they normally do is when they invite NMA for such discussion, they also invite NAD, even though they will tell us that we will come with NMA. But such invitation has not happened. And it's important I go to that next point. Have you ever heard anybody from the Federal Ministry of Health condemn the bill by Honorable Ganiyu Johnson, just like our elder, Dr. Chris Ngige, just did? They have not done that. And our members have this information that it is actually the Federal Ministry of Health that may be supporting. It looks as if they are the ones supporting that honorable member to bring up that bill, because we have been in several meetings where they plan to bring up a policy statement to forcefully keep doctors in Nigeria against their wish. We were able to stop it at that level. So it looks as if because they didn't succeed in that, they are now going behind the scene to go through that honorable member to bring up this draconian bill that will end up worsening the indices we are talking about.
Well, Dr. Oji, that conversation around making a law, you know the process. It'll still go through certain points, certain levels, and the NMA, the NARD also, will have an opportunity at the public hearing to say no or to raise your issues. You don't think it's okay to step that down in the demands you're making and wait for that time if ever it gets to that, or perhaps even have a conversation with the legislator?
There is widespread condemnation of that bill. I have not seen anybody outside that honorable member publicly supporting that bill. So he is a Nigerian. He's seen the condemnation. There is no point wasting taxpayers' money to go for public hearing. You gather people to come to Abuja for a bill that is obviously defective, both in research and in statistics. Even the figures he quoted in that bill, they are all wrong.
Okay.
So there is no point doubling down on a wrong path. He should withdraw the bill and save Nigeria from this distraction.
A question that I wanted to ask you, Dr. Oji, is how profitable are health facilities? According to the minister 2 years ago, there are 40,017 in Nigeria. Most of them, about 80–90% of them, are privately owned. Now, NARD is probably speaking about public hospitals and the rest of them. So one wonders if people pay to offer services in hospitals, how profitable do you think it is? Because as Nyota asked you the other time, if the federal government has said they have cash issues or cash flow issues, it perhaps behooves on anyone who is considering extra income or extra expenditure on behalf of government to say, these are the other ways that you can make money. Do you think there are loopholes that need to be blocked in hospitals so that they can generate enough for the hospitals themselves, or what?
Of course, the health sector is part of the Nigerian system, and you know that there have been several allegations of corruption here and there. So part of what we are demanding is that in addition to increasing the allocation to health, government should also make efforts to checkmate how these funds are being utilized to prevent corruption. And as for private sector involvement in health sector, it is the government that we encourage that they need to create an enabling environment for that to happen. But again, as long as you keep not having the numbers, even the private sector may not even have people to employ. You've heard of several times that some hospitals even advertised for residents to come in, and they didn't see anybody. So this is an emergency. And now this is actually known to step in at times like this, because we are the ones involved directly. We are the front liners. We know that we are not enough anymore, and that if government does not intervene in the right way, this will continue to worsen, and it may get to a point where we won't have doctors again. And by the way, let's be clear, it's not only doctors that are leaving the country. Nurses are leaving, and many other clinical staff. So what we are talking about is not just for us, it's for all clinical staff in the hospital. The government should increase this remuneration to the extent that people will look at it. And we are not even asking for them, we are not asking for equivalence of what is paid outside. We are just saying, pay us something that will match the economic status of the country and the cost of living. It's only when you do that people can decide to take the pains and stay back and serve their country.
Speaking of which, Dr. Oji, let me borrow from a quote from the Minister of Labour, made on another fora. He said, if the NARD, who we have been managing their matter, we're giving them everything they want, including their medical resident training fund. We are paying them, even when in training, pay them a full salary, pay them all the allowances, and you decided that we have not done enough. Like I said, you have an option to go. So it's as if the minister is saying that, look, we've given the resident doctors all that they're asking for. So I'd like you to reconcile your demands with this position expressed by the minister.
The demands we are making are very clear, and they are all in our communique. I have tried to highlight a few of them, major ones. We don't have proof that those things have been addressed? Has government been reviewed upwards? The answer is no. In fact, even in that communique, you see that we still have salary arrears of 2014, 2015, and 2016. Okay, we still have this obnoxious bill that has now been withdrawn. And the medical residence training fund for 2023 has not been paid. And again, I have to also alert Nigerians, because let's not look as if we are being treated specially. That fund we are talking about is just like every other government employee who is going for training that government is sponsoring. Government pays for the DTA, pays for the examination fee and the training fee. It's exactly the same thing they are doing for us. So there's nothing special. There's nothing special about it that they are doing to doctors. It's just that because Nigerian has agreed that we need specialists, they are now doing it in large numbers for this group of people, group of doctors who have, elected to go into specialist training. So there's nothing out of ordinary about it. But that of 2023 has not been paid. And people who have gone for exam March, April, May, we have always advocated for government to try as much as possible to pay this within the first quarter of the year, so that the people who will go for that training and that exam by March, April, May, we have the funds available to do that.
So you said
but
earlier,
that for the year has not been paid.
So you said earlier that in the conversation brokered with the NMA that government is, you hear the government is making an offer of 25%. Would that be satisfactory to the Association of Resident Doctors? And if it's not, what would be satisfactory to the association?
Our members are saying that the 25% they are hiring is not going to be enough to address the economic condition of the country. And you also know that the peculiar allowance that Mark talked about earlier, we were not affected. They didn't include us. And there is this imminent increase in the price of fuel. So if you take all this into consideration, you know that 25% will not go anywhere, and it is not going to address the issue. And we have always said it, let us be brought to the negotiation table so that we can all work together and put all the figures together using the data we have to arrive at a percentage that will be acceptable to everybody.
Let me double down, Dr. Orji, let me double down on the concern raised mildly by my colleagues in Abuja earlier on. For the Association of Resident Doctors, you have the peculiar allowance, you have the medical residency allowance, you also have the hazard allowance. That's besides, the regular monthly remuneration for resident doctors. Correct me if I'm wrong on all of these outlined allowances, but compared with other category of medical workers in Nigeria's health institutions, Nigerian doctors do enjoy this privileged list of allowances. Does this isn't this disparity rather huge, and then justify the commentary by the minister about the sense of entitlement held by doctors?
Sorry, we are not entitled to peculiar allowance. I said it earlier, they didn't pay us that. Now, all the allowances you talked about, apart from the medical residence training fund, all the allowances are part of the salary they pay us, which they pay every other health worker in the hospital. So because this is the misconception people keep having, we are doctors who work in the hospital, we render services, and at the same time we are being trained. So the salary you are paying is for the work we are doing, and that is why when we withdraw our services, the health system collapses. So, of course, you cannot say you won't pay someone who is working. Then I've also explained that the medical residence training fund is just like every other training fund they pay to any other government employee who is being sponsored for training. There's nothing absolutely special about what we are being given. We need specialists in the country, unless the government is saying they don't need specialists again, then all of us can just enroll as medical officers and start working like that. And of course, you won't have specialists, you won't have consultants to take care of specialist conditions. So there's nothing special about the treatment they are giving to us.
And lastly, Dr. Orji, Nelta asked earlier about the register of resident doctors that you have being 80,000, but less than 40,000 are working across board. Of course, you've expressed a concern about the bill proposed by the member of the House of Representatives, but for the community of doctors in Nigeria, how concerned are you about this seeming state of emergency in the health sector with the continuous exodus of Nigerian doctors, for the health sector back home with this hugely diminishing?
Just as quickly as the thing, we think deeply about this whole thing. We don't have the numbers again. If you go to many of the emergency department in the hospital, you don't have enough people there, and people are dying from this. People come to the hospital to see their doctors. They don't get to see them because many of them have left, and they will now turn against the few that are around and beat them up and assault them. That is also part of the reason we are having this increase in attacks on healthcare professionals. So it's affecting us the more, just like it's affecting the Nigerian people. And we have been saying this repeatedly, that the most important cause of this brain drain is poor remuneration. Nobody has disagreed with us on this. So why are you not addressing that cause? Why are you now trying to go through another means to get a bill that is an affront on the fundamental human rights of freedom of movement and choice on Nigerian doctors? It is simply not going to work.
The president of the Nigerian Medical Association recently on one of our programs talked about the fact that there are many qualified doctors in Nigeria that are unemployed. But also that there are many qualified doctors in Nigeria who would rather go into ICT, go into music, go into other forms of industry without not wanting to practice medicine that they graduated and studied for. Why is that the situation? If all these things you're asking for, that NAT's asking for, better equipment, better environment, better remuneration, do you think those doctors who've been trained to serve in the health sector would return there?
Of course, many of them, it's actually more lucrative to do other things, than being a doctor in Nigeria. And again, where it may also be about interest. Everything is not really about remuneration. We know that there are so many people that came into the profession and discovered that what they hoped for, in terms of practice, is not what they are seeing, and they simply decided to go elsewhere. So, but I know that for others, it will be about the poor remuneration that we are getting, and that is why they decided to go to other sectors.
So I'd like to know, you've given a 2-week ultimatum. What are you hoping will happen within this 2 weeks?
Our hope is that bill should be withdrawn, number one. Number two is that the Medical Residency Training Fund for 2023 should be paid. They have finished the compilation. We don't know what is delaying the payment. The third thing is that the government should discuss with us and find a way of reviewing these comments upwards to a significant amount before the expiration or before this current regime of President Muhammadu Buhari
Let me get
hands over.
You are saying that the bill, which is not in the hands of the executive, it's a private member bill, should be withdrawn as part of your demands. To who now? Is it to the National Assembly or is it to the executive arm of government, who are your direct employers?
I've said before that some people are supporting him. That's why he's doubling down. So these things...
Do you have evidence of that?
We are going to provide it when we have negotiation. The point is that the government has not even called us for a negotiation. All we are hearing is threats. And it is not going to help anybody, because we had a hard time trying to control our members in that meeting, because you know that many of the things we listed, we have given ultimatum last year for them. So some people felt that we can actually go on a knee-jerk strike. But we felt that it wouldn't be good for the country, and they decided to give this 2 weeks, to give enough time for government to come out, because let them come and prove to us that it is not coming from the Ministry of Health. When we resolve that I'm sure that the honourable member will withdraw the bill.
You are the one who's alleging. You say when he gets to the time, you will provide evidence that, it is the government or it is not the government. Yet you say let them come and give you evidence. That's
No, I didn't say that. I said at the negotiation table, we will provide the evidence. We are not going to say it on national TV.
And if you're not called to the negotiation table?
We'll get back to our members at the end of 2 weeks. In fact, we have 13 days now. 11 days now. We will get back to them and seek further directives. So anything can happen.
So essentially what you're saying is that the negotiation which the NMA is currently having with the government doesn't concern you. You want to be called separately.
We are not even sure NMA is negotiating with government. That's the point. From the information, I may be wrong, but we have tried to ask, we have been listening, because the Minister of Health promised us, as far back as January, that if there is going to be any other negotiation, apart from the one they had last year, that they will call us. They have not called us.
So that was a promise given by the Minister himself?
Yes. So there has not been negotiation on this issue this year at all. And that's why when we started hearing about 25% increment, we are wondering where it came from.
Dr. Oji, just before we let you go, there are those who will be wondering. Incidentally, you're dealing with people who also took the same oath you took. The Minister of Health, the Minister of Labour, they're all doctors again, took the same oath you took, which is an oath to save lives, to provide health services, to ensure that people are safe and healthy. Nigerians will be wondering, how much of that oath are the doctors standing by?
We are standing fully by the oath we took, and that's why I keep telling you that we are doing this for the Nigerian people. They need to understand that, because when everybody leaves, there won't be anybody to treat them. Secondly, part of that oath is also to take care of ourselves. So we shouldn't be blamed. It's actually unfortunate. Honestly, if we don't want to be threatening strike or even going on strike, if the Nigerian people on their own can elect to do this fight for us while we remain in the hospitals and work, we simply accept it. But when nobody seems to be helping out, we have to help ourselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emeka Oji is the National President, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors. He's also a Senior Registrar, Orthopedic and Trauma Surgery. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Do stay with us. We're meeting another set of workers, still a day after the Workers' Day celebration. What are the challenges that the manufacturers have to deal with in the course of trying to provide some kind of service to Nigerians? Some of them include inadequate raw materials for the industry, near non-existent power, inadequate funding, security, poor infrastructure. There are those who will argue, though, that the manufacturers themselves are also part of the challenge. Well, I'm not the one that would answer that question. We have in the studio the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start from that last statement, or that assumption by some people in some quarters, that the manufacturers in Nigeria are also part of the problem of manufacturing in the country. How do you react to that?
Yeah, it's coming at a surprise to me. I thought I'm the victim of the system. So, for one to say I'm part of the problem, I'll be looking forward to how they are going to prove that. What is the story behind that that assumption? Because for us, the environment has tended to limit our performance, and the macroeconomic environment in particular has tended to limit our performance, and one will be looking to how it will be resolved rather than assuming that we are part of the problem.
Amongst the challenges that you have listed are inadequate raw materials for the industry. Is it that with how blessed Nigeria is, you can't find any of these raw materials in country? You need to go beyond the shores of Nigeria to get your raw materials?
No, certainly we source many of our raw materials within the country. But as you are aware, most of those are in the agricultural sector. And you know that sector has been heavily impacted in recent times by the insecurity that we have. We've also had the question of scale. Have we been able to scale the sourcing of those raw materials? Are they available in the desired quantities? And those who are also supplying it, they have to be certain that they will be able to get a market for their raw materials before they embark on it. But we have to import because most of those raw materials that manufacturers use are not locally available, especially those that in the realm of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, active ingredients, as well as sourcing it's not only raw materials, we also source our machines and our spares from outside of the country. But M.A.N, for instance, has what we call resource-based industrialization, which we push our members to source their raw materials locally. But most of those cannot be sourced locally.
Well, power continues to be a very major issue for the manufacturing sector. And I think that if you ask a lot of manufacturers, they will tell you that their biggest headache is sourcing power. Just this morning, the papers reported a story that said that I think for the last 6 months, manufacturers had spent about 76.2 billion naira on alternative sources. And the questions, will now abound as to how it is that we've spent so much on alternative power, yet, our power sector is there looking for funding, looking for ways to provide power to, those who are willing to pay for this power. What exactly is the missing link between the current providers of electricity, as we know it, and, manufacturers who really need this power to be able to get their businesses running?
Well, okay, it's correct to say that power is one of our major headaches. It's been for a very long time. And in terms of our cost structure, it's somewhere between 32 to 40%, depending on how power intensive your manufacturing process is. And what we have seen over the years is the way that the power sector reform has been managed. It has not delivered the kind of power that we want. Most Nigerians are aware of the lack of traction that we have recorded in terms of how it was privatized, and also in terms of the readiness and the expertise and the resources that those who bought were able to bring on board. But for us in the manufacturing sector, there has even been government initiatives that will have ameliorated the challenge. And one of it, which I actually regret to say, is this eligible customer scheme, which will have helped a situation where our major users, those using more than 2 megawatts of electricity, will be able to source power directly from TCN. That will have helped. But for some strange reasons, NEC itself is not actively and intentionally making it happen. We've had situations where difficulties have been placed in the way of manufacturers who are qualified to enjoy that scheme. It was announced by the Minister of Power exercising his powers under the reform. But it's been very, very difficult for our members to assess. And what is even most painful is the fact that even when you don't get power, you still pay. And M.A.N is currently even engaged in legal tussle with the NEC and the DISCOs in terms of the rates they charge way back out of the MITO. We are still yet to resolve the matter, though we are making efforts to resolve it out of court. So for us, I think it is the level of investment that has been done in that sector, is the expertise that is required. So we are looking forward to government actually retracing a step and seeing that particularly in the incoming government, we should be able to crack this challenge because it has led to being non-competitive, and even the alternative source of energy has become a nightmare to us. So both ways we lose.
Yeah, the cost of diesel has not been very kind. I mean, in a sector that has been deregulated, so to speak, and we've seen the climbing costs of diesel. I'm wondering, are manufacturers allowed to import diesel, or do they still have to wait? Because we understand that sector has been totally liberalized. Are manufacturers allowed to bring in their own diesel if they want?
Yes, you know, bringing in your diesel at a fair rate. First, you are a manufacturer. And then when you delve into the issue of importation of fuel, what quantity will you want to import as a manufacturer that will justify all the hazards that you have to go through? And as a matter of fact, we had explored that possibility before, but it didn't end up being something that you want. Even when you are importing your raw materials and your spares and your machines, you go through a lot of challenges. When you now add that of importing diesel, but many of us are trying to get concessionary rates by making bulk purchases. But then it really, really holds down your working capital and your funds that will have invested for expansion. I mean, we do not have liberal loan terms. And so it is always very difficult for you, even when you move out of your mainstream activities, to try to improve your businesses.
You know, the plethora of things that the manufacturer has to deal with, one will begin to wonder what happens to the issues of coming together and partnerships to ease some of this pressure. What happens when the manufacturer has to deal with all of these things? Now with the liberalization, so to speak, of the power sector, now states can generate their own power. You can do captive power and all of that. Would the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria be looking towards that? If you could just answer this before we get to Lagos, where our colleagues, there's another guest in Lagos who went to the
No, certainly. And already the association actually has a special purpose vehicle called the M.A.N, Manufacturers Power Company Limited, yes, MPDs. And what we try to do is to support power providers. We've been succeeding at it, actually. We have one going on in Lagos, around Ogba area, and we have a situation where we are supporting power providers to reach a cluster of manufacturers. We have been doing that, and now that it has been liberalized, as you said, it's going to give us a lot of opportunity to exploit. Already, we are beginning to speak with some states. We are beginning to direct their attention to the industrial clusters that we have, and it will help to assuage the challenge. But you need to also understand that even though the grants have been given for us to, for states to participate, and which means other players are going to come in, there has to be a readiness. The government has to be intentional about ensuring that no stumbling blocks, no hindrances are put in the ways of those who will naturally come out to take such opportunities, because that was what we had with the eligible customer scheme.
Ayon Buki.
Well, we have with us here Gabriel Idahosa, who is Deputy President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. He's also Managing Partner of UHI Professional Services. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting, the conversation that you have, and I'm pretty sure you have some thoughts as well. But let's begin with the seemingly simple question of, in what ways have government failed the manufacturing sector? And what are those urgent steps, short, medium, long-term steps, that the incoming administration needs to take in order to help the manufacturing sector recover some of its losses, both in terms of jobs and several other things?
Well, as Man has said, the first thing is power. When power was going to be privatized, there are three sections or segments of the industry: generation, transmission, and distribution. For some reason, generation was privatized, distribution was privatized, and transmission, that takes the power from this generator to distributor, was not privatized. And you wonder if there was a good business case for privatizing generation and distribution. And this industry is a single industry. It's the electricity supply industry. And all of them must work at the same pace. And transmission was left in the hands of government. So that was the origin of the result we are getting from the privatization effort. So the two sections that are privatized are moving, they are investing with private sector energy, but the transmission company is still in the hands of government. And if there's a reason for privatizing anything, it is because of the very significant difference in efficiency in managing any organization, particularly commercial organizations, between government and the private sector. So all the efforts to drive the rapid growth of the electricity industry is just held down because you are still dealing with a transmission business that is still run by government. So perhaps the most important thing you want to see is for government to actually privatize transmission. So the entire industry will be speaking to the private sector. So manufacturers can go to the entire industry and say, this is the pace at which we want to work, and everyone will invest on that basis. But now we are investing in generation heavily. We have about 13,000 megawatts generated, but you only get about less than 4,000 distributed because the transmission capacity is not growing as fast as generation and distribution is growing.
Almost 80 billion naira is what the private sector said that they have spent. Manufacturers have spent on electricity, generating electricity within the past 6 months. And you're saying that if the government should privatize the transmission sector of the electricity distribution chain, it'll seriously help the manufacturing sectors. That's what you're saying. Now, how much do you think the manufacturing sector will save from that activity of government that you're proposing?
No, first of all, the 80 billion that is being listed, it's just what is recorded. The fact is that it is much more than that. Much more than that. Because power itself is a major industry. The power industry itself is a huge industry by itself. And that industry is not growing because of this disconnect in the center. So we need to, first of all, get the transmission out. And then you begin to see how much we are talking about. It's probably up to twice of that. Because there's so much self-generation that is not recorded. The Manufacturer Association can capture this 80 billion from their members and other visible and traceable operators. But you have manufacturers in villages, in all kinds of corners in this. In fact, in the markets, if you go to Balogun or any of these markets, there are manufacturers in that market producing one thing or the other and selling to the traders. So it is perhaps another 50% on top of the 80 that we are talking about.
There have been efforts in the past, Mr. Idahosa, to, how do I put this, stop importation of generators, which many people have said is a major industry on its own. What kind of conversation do you think the incoming administration should be having with them? Because they are also employers of labor, they would say. They also have their investments. They have their stakes in a lot of things. So what kind of conversation would you say that the incoming administration would have with them, so that they also would retain their investments and whatever it is that they need to maintain their own businesses as well?
You see, that's a red herring that we already hear, that generators, the people who import and distribute generators have no power over the policy. They cannot tell government, don't privatize transmission. They cannot. They do not even have what they produce is not even enough to meet the country's needs. So that issue of, it's always said that the importance of generators are, if you look at telecom, nobody stopped the industry from growing once it was properly privatized. So I don't think the generator importer is important in this equation. The important factor is get the industry completely in the hands of the private sector, so that everyone will be investing at the same pace. Generating companies are investing, transmission companies. It has been advocated that Nigeria is too large for one transmission company. There will probably need 3 or 4 transmission companies. And then all 3 or 4 of them investing rapidly, and the distribution company investing rapidly. In fact, the distribution companies cannot invest, or it doesn't make sense to expand your distribution company capacity when you are not getting supply from generation. So it means you just like build warehouses and no goods coming in from.
Well, I wonder how long that would take us to the level of sufficiency. But let's look at another aspect of the problem, which is, access to raw materials for manufacturers. I know that it's a challenge for most manufacturers because they are not cited where where raw materials are being produced so that they can offtake, close to in proximity and manufacture. So vis-a-vis the list, of items delisted from accessing Forex for importation. Can you begin to look at that and tell us what policies government can put in place to aid manufacturers in accessing raw materials, or if they must import, those items should be delisted from that list, restricted from accessing Forex for importation?
Well, first of all, raw materials, whether it's agricultural, whether it's solid minerals, whether it's anything between the two, it's a function of a separate industry. So we're asking ourselves, how much can we support agriculture and processing and logistics from the farm to the factories? Man have just talked about security. In perhaps 30 or maybe all 36, maybe 30 states in this country, agriculture is impacted. Farmers are afraid to go to farm. In fact, for you to run a farm successfully in Nigeria now, you invest in security. The investment in securing your farm is a very large part of your investment. So that is going on. So the manufacturers would love to have the raw materials. They are even ready to pay the logistics to get the products from the farm. But when farmers are afraid to farm, and you have to be a medium or large-scale farmer to afford the logistics and the security, the cost of security, to keep your farms operating. So the decline in production because of security, it's outside the control of manufacturers. It's outside the control of the farmers.
So that leaves manufacturers at a loss, and then they inevitably have to access Forex for importation. That's a follow-up question, but we must take a break right now. When we return, we'll look extensively at that. Stay with Sunrise Daily.
When you have cavities, it hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out.
M.A.N.
Oh, I wish you were here.
I'm always with you.
But it's not the same without you.
M.A.N 5G's amazing technology will change how we experience life and the internet. Get ready to encounter the incredible, and remember, no be juju, na M.A.N 5G.
This is a notice of meeting to all newly elected senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. This is to invite all newly elected senators to an important meeting scheduled as follows. Venue, Fraser Suite, Plot 294, Leventis Close, Central Business District, Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Date, Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. And the time is 8:30 p.m. Please endeavor to attend as important issues pertaining to the overall interest of all members will be discussed. Announcer, Pro-Tem Convener, Salih Mustafa, Senator-elect, Kwara Central Senatorial District.
When you have cavities, it hurts so bad it makes you miss school. Even football.
But we prevent cavities before they form with Colgate. Colgate locks calcium in.
Keeps cavities out.
Welcome back. It's the Sunrise Daily on Channels Television, and on this segment we're looking at the manufacturing sector, the challenges in the sector specifically, and we're picking the minds of stakeholders in the sector, particularly with a view to coming up with policy suggestions for the incoming administration to implement such that, the manufacturing sector can thrive in the coming years. We still have with us Mr. Gabriel Idahusa, who is with us in our Lagos studio. So we're looking at access to raw materials just before the break. And the CBN recently restricted access to Forex for the importation of milk. And I know that the LCCI, sort of frowned at that, saying that they were not consulted. We know that Nigeria can achieve self-sufficiency where that is concerned, but there are challenges. So I'd just like you to speak to those challenges and, the justification for the restriction of access to Forex for the importation of milk.
Well, the central bank has not given any specific reason. The general position of central bank is that we don't have enough foreign currency, and so we have to prioritize, and then they just pick and choose the items that they don't want to give foreign currency for. In the short term, there's not much anyone can do about it because the foreign currency is not produced by the central bank.
Yeah.
It is the result of export of products by all other operators in the economy that brings foreign currency. Until we have an international financial center that generates foreign currency by itself. So that's another big issue with our current policies, foreign exchange policy. As we speak, the options are you either wait until you can get foreign currency from the central bank, or you go to the parallel market. And essentially, the central bank is saying that we are not the only suppliers of forein currency.
But the reasons,
whatever
regardless,
we have is that we will just decide who we give it to. And if you don't like it, we are sorry. There's nothing we can do about it.
But the reasons, regardless, the CBN will be saving Nigeria billions of naira in the importation of milk, for which we can, achieve self-sufficiency back home if we, concentrated all our energies in that aspect of agriculture.
Yes, that argument goes for every other item that is restricted. The CBN started with 41 items, and then they kept adding a few items. For each item they add, that argument, exactly the same argument, that you are forcing that industry to scale down, be far below their capacity. And so long as you do that, the whole economy growth is restricted. We are struggling to grow beyond 2% GDP just because we don't have enough raw materials, both in manufacturing and even in other sectors that need inputs that are imported. So in the short term, CBN is more or less has exhausted its wits. It cannot give what it doesn't have. So it keeps saying that it is what I have that I will share with everybody, starting with those that are absolutely necessary that they cannot negotiate. For example, equipment for security purposes, which is top line for the country, to protect everybody else. So they have that priority they are forced to deal with, and then by the time you are, as a manufacturer, an individual manufacturer as a sector, you are caught very low in that priority. You suffer what we are getting now with the dairy industry.
Okay. Well, let me take a question to Mr. Jai Kadri in our Abuja studio. Well, you've clearly been putting out some statements in recent time, especially concerning how things have been doing in your among the manufacturers and how it is doing now. You've compared 2021 and 2022 in particular. What are the things you would say, if you can give us those figures again, if you have them offhand, and what are the likely consequences of doing or not doing certain things as you are proposing now in the year that we are under now and in the nearest future, if certain specific things are not done?
Well, thank you. I believe that you must have been referring to our manufacturers' confidence index, and you might also have been talking about our half-yearly economic review, the one that we just. But we have also been putting out information as to what we expect from the incoming administration. It's basically in an attempt to assess how manufacturing performance has been. You are aware that our contribution to the GDP has remained between 9, 10, and 11%. You've seen that our capacity utilization is around 50 to 53%. You have also seen that the costs that we are incurring in providing alternative energy, you have already brought that out. You have also seen that even the recent Naira crunch has led to a 25% dip in our sales profile. You have seen how the most profitable or the most performing sector is being limited by excise. So all of these have come together to reduce the performance of the manufacturing sector. And what we say is that in order for us to begin to see some progress in that sector of the economy, the government, even though there's an outgoing government, the incoming government in particular, should be able to take direct steps to what I would call stop the bleeding, stop the downward trend in the manufacturing sector, and give life to it. We see, for instance, immediately addressing the issue of this same exercise that I've spoken about. There was a government roadmap that was agreed in year 2022 to last for 2022, 2023, and 2024, where there's an excise escalation. But even before the end of the first year, we have seen an increase by government in violation of that roadmap. This is when they have not even been able to assess the impact in the first less than 1 year, as I've spoken about. And this is against all the data, the information that has been given to government that this will have grave consequences for that thriving economy. And I'm talking about the food and beverage, the excise on wines, alcoholic beverages, and tobacco. Is ill-advised at this time for us to have that. So if you are talking about what needs to be done, I think the thing to be done is to immediately reverse that increase, because it's out of the agreement that government itself had with the sector, without consultation, without assessing the impact in the first year. Another one that you also look at is to stop the bleeding in the fuel subsidy. I mean, because for us, it is a major impact. We believe that if the funds that can be generated from stopping the payment of subsidy, it will be helpful. I believe that the consumption of fuel subsidy of petrol is overstated. We could see that there was immediately
Does that mean, just a quick one, Mr. Jai, my sincere apologies. Very, very briefly, because my colleagues in Abuja need to ask you a few questions before we let you go. Is this saying that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria is for or against the removal of fuel subsidy?
I think we are completely for the removal of fuel subsidy.
Okay.
Because at the end of it, you will see that it is not benefiting the average Nigerian. And as a manufacturer, we see it as incentivizing importation, because what you are subsidizing is a foreign product, and it is not yielding any benefit for the average consumer. Because if you really look at it, most part of the country are not even have never bought fuel at the subsidized rate. I mean, outside the major cities, you don't really have it. And like I said before, I believe that, and I've read from credible sources, that the quantum of PMS that we are importing and subsidizing, that we say we are importing and subsidizing, is grossly overstated. So I can see an immediate reduction in the volume. And I think we need to move away from the narrative of immediately asking, so what is going to what are the palliatives? I think it is necessary for us to realistically assess what is, what is on ground, and run away from being scared about the possible fallout. In addition to, of course, there has to be palliative, but in addition, we must look at how we can reinvest the funds that we are going to get from the fuel subsidy that we are not paying.
All right, Mr. Kadri, a quick one here, just for purposes of clarification. When you are saying, they should remove excise from wines, spirits, alcohol, are you talking about these products that are imported or exported? I thought that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria's advocacy should rather be the removal or relaxation of taxes on locally manufactured goods rather than imported goods.
Yes, it's for the locally manufactured products. Okay. I would be happy if you double the ones on excise, double the excise on imported products. It is for those that are manufactured locally that I'm worried about. Okay. And that's what we have advocated.
Okay, let me quickly ask you then, because, manufacturers talk about the challenges, but we do know that before now there's been some attempt at, bridging, the goals that the government would like to see for the manufacturing sector and, where they currently are. One of the things which government came up with, and you also spoke to loans, how loans are not very available. The Bank of Industry is supposed to help in some instances with manufacturers and the challenges that they have with loans. What would you say, how much effect would you say that bank has had on the Manufacturers Association, and what exactly is the gap that is left to be bridged between, some of the demands that manufacturers are making and what government needs to do?
Yes, I think BOI has been quite helpful in terms of giving loans at not so much single digits, because you still need to get it through the commercial banks, and they charge administrative fees. So when you still get it at somewhere below, between 10 to 12%, is still a lot better. But the thing is that the BOI is not liquid enough to be able to meet the needs of all the manufacturers, you would say. And so it has continued to leave a gap that government may need to fill either by recapitalizing BOI or also expanding those special windows for us to be able to access those loans, because the average lending rates now is somewhere between 26 to 28%. And for a manufacturer, if you give him any facility that is more than a single digit, you are not being helpful.
How much are you currently, manufacturers currently accessing it from the Bank of Industry?
Somewhere between 9%, 8-9%. But when it does get to the commercial banks and you need to now access it, they charge fees that puts it between 11 to 12%. I mean, that's the best you can have anyway.
Okay.
Can I? Okay, just one of the things that of concern to many Nigerians is jobs, job creation, unemployment, and all that the numbers continue to increase, so to speak. How much of that is Manufacturers Association helping to cut down? For instance, how many jobs have been lost in the last 1 year?
Well, quite a lot. I think what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to be a veritable avenue for generating employment. But rather than increasing our employment portfolio, the fact of the matter is that we are having to lay off workers.
Lay off?
Yes, to lay off workers. Many industries, for instance, in the Northeast, in the last 8 years, we have lost 60% of our members to insecurity. Northeast, I mean around Plateau, Bauchi, Gombe, and all those areas. You cannot expect any growth in terms of manufacturing employment in those sectors. And what we are, the recent Naira crunch, for instance, had led to a reduction in the number of shifts that we run. You cannot retain people if you are not able to produce. And if you produce and you are not able to sell, you have to cut back. Otherwise, you will be investing on procuring warehouses to be able to store your goods. And don't forget that we also have the shelf life of what we produce. So it has not been an upward movement. It has actually been a downward movement.
I'll come back to this matter as regards, so I will talk about the wages, minimum wages against what the manufacturers are paying, so to speak. But let's get to Mr. Idahosa. Mr. Idahosa, your organization looks at policy and how it affects the industry and the economy generally. But let's look at that, the unemployment matter and how the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria are working in that space. We've heard Mr. Kadri tell us that in the last 1 year, they've lost 60% of their members in the Northeast to insecurity. That also speaks to the fact that unemployment in that area would have gone up. But across the country, in terms of jobs and layoffs, so to speak, how do you think government policy has worked? And what should the incoming administration be looking to do in that area?
Well, government policies affect all the sectors, so from manufacturing to logistics to distribution to retailing, every sector is affected by these same policies. And once these policies work or don't work, it directly affects unemployment and employment. So just as the manufacturers are laying off, retailers are laying off, a couple of shopping malls either closed down for long periods of time and are resuming. A lot of retailers had to lay off as well, and even their support facilities, transporters. So when we have the national figure of about 33–34% unemployment, it's the aggregation of all the job losses and lack of employment across all sectors. So the policies that make the economy work generally have been articulated again and again. We talk about power, we talk about the general bureaucracy that we just describe as ease of doing business in every arm of government, not just the federal government. States and local governments, the sheer multiplicity of taxes that you lose count of taxes. Anytime you count them, in another 2 months, you have many more taxes. So there are all these general policies around what makes business run profitably, from power to infrastructure to the little matters of addressing certain things within the power of government. If government can just improve the implementation of existing rules, that you could see some improvement. But where in every government institution you struggle, you keep struggling to get government officials to understand that it is an economy that is running efficiently, that makes profits, pays taxes, and puts more revenue in the hands of government. So it's a broad section of federal, state, and local governments looking at all business-facing policies and finding ways to improve them based on consistent advocacy that all of us in the organized private sector continue to make. And that's why we have the Presidential Enabling Business Council, which was to aggregate all these policies. But we find that they are done some work, but there's still a lot of work to do in addressing the whole atmosphere of ease of doing business. I guess that will be our first priority as private sector, to engage government and to say, look at the whole picture, look at the landscape, and you see all the things we have said are working against business. What can you do when you settle down? We obviously will engage the government once it's settled down, the incoming government.
Well, indeed, a lot to do, and it would look like the manpower to do it is disappearing by the day. I'm just wondering whether you're also placing into consideration the growing trend of globalization and how it's affecting middle to low-income countries where, members of the workforce are leaving for greener pastures. Is this something that concerns you?
Well, it's so prevalent now, so pervasive that it's generally the local and international economies are looking at it and saying, how do you deal with it? These are individual decisions. Individuals saying, I have an opportunity to go out and I need to go out. You can't force anybody to stay where he feels he's not getting a good deal. So what generally we think in the business community is that first is to see what you can do in the interim to keep people in the country. Second is to see how rapidly you produce more people with those skills so you can afford to export some of them. Those are the two things that we need to do, both as business and in cooperation with government. There are countries, for example, like Cuba, that simply export doctors. It's part of their economy. They produce far more doctors than they need, and it's a business for Cuba to export doctors. So it's a matter of getting to understand that individual behavior is determined by their economic interest. So if people want to go, let's deal with that and ensure that we produce more people with the skills, enough to have for our economy and to supply the world economy.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Idahosa. Thank you. Indeed, Nigeria needs to look at how to export some of its resources, areas of comparative advantage. I mean, we could begin to export, like Cuba, human resources to other countries. We can also begin to export some of the things that you and your colleagues are manufacturing. Thank you so much. We've been speaking to Mr. Segun Ajayi Kadri, Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. That matter about wages, we'll bring you back to look at the wages as against the minimum wage, national minimum wage. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And here, Lagos.
Well, yes, we want to thank you also, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, Deputy President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, Managing Partner, UHI Professional Services. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate it. Well, your own contribution to the program this morning is also part of our program. Let's take this first one from Kenneth, who sent us an email and says, manufacturing in Nigeria is beset with quite a few challenges. Among them is power supply. Most firms rely on emergency power generators to run seamless operations, eventually adding to costs. The country's physical infrastructural deficiencies are also a major constraint. Difficult access to credit, the cost of imported raw materials, and skilled labor being the additional challenges.
Well, this one is from Henry O'Keefe. And he says the few patriotic medical doctors that have not embraced the Japa syndrome should be properly and adequately remunerated by the government. It is more dignifying and in the interest of Nigerians to enhance the working conditions of our medical personnel that legislate to restrain their exodus.
The Nigerian public health sector is run as a social service and not as a commercial concern. Until universal health insurance kicks in, government is obligated to fill in the fun. Fill in the fun. I don't think government is finding it funny, but Hey, this is where we wrap it up this beautiful Tuesday morning. Thank you so much for watching and sending your contributions. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusu.
And I'm Neo Taigwe. In basic economics, you understand there are resources of production, factors of production. One of them is human resources. Let's ensure that the workers serving and growing are provided for so that they can do their best. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, and speaking of exporting human resource, certainly not our doctors. We've exported enough of that. Thank you for watching this morning. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Can we make Nigeria come first? Have a lovely day.
From the predictable to the unpredictable, news is fast-paced. On The World Today, we bring you stories from far and wide, narrating the intricacies of politics, diplomacy, war, and disasters. Join us as we make sense of it all, with in-depth coverage and analysis from across the globe. The World Today, every weekday at 5:30 p.m.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky mourns 2 killed in Pavlova, and including a boy killed near a school. Officials count losses of core structures, say 34 injured from an attack in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Plus, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky and his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau discussed defense cooperation after Russia's multiple overnight strike on various Ukrainian cities. Thank you for joining us this morning. Russia unleashed a fresh volley of missiles on Ukraine overnight in a city in the east, killing 2 people, setting off huge blazes and damaging dozens of homes and other buildings. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky announced the 2 deaths in his nightly video address, vowing in his words, the Russian occupiers will receive answers for every such strike. President Zelensky also said a 14-year-old boy was killed near his school when he was hit by a bomb in the Chernihiv region close to the Russian border.
The Dnipro region, the terrorist missiles claimed the lives of 2 very young men. My condolences go out to the families. 40 others, women, children and men, received aid after having suffered wounds and injuries.
14 років дитині. Він просто був неподалік школи.
President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. Meanwhile, officials in Pavlograd, 34 people have been wounded, according to them, and dozens of homes damaged overnight in Russian strikes. According to the Ukrainian military, in the district, 80 private residential buildings, 9 schools, and 5 shops were affected. Officials add that during the missile attack in the Dnipropetrovsk region overnight, 24 high-rise buildings were also damaged. The attack on Pavlograd, a city and railway hub, comes during the second wave of nationwide missile strikes in 3 days, with Moscow apparently reviving its winter tactic of long-range strikes ahead of a planned Ukrainian counteroffensive. In the meantime, the regional administration of Kherson says Russian forces attacked the city 8 times with 41 shells over the past 24 hours. The administration said on Telegram Russian forces targeted the building of the state